Hey VC. So I'm a little late to the party on this topic. There have been some really great videos made by Tales from the Crate, Grandma's Handbag, Not Enough Records made a great video, and a couple others. Another fat bearded man talking about records made one. I'm blanking on the rest. Anyway, this is a topic started by I believe Matt Hayes, and the question is it rude to call an album overrated? And I fully acknowledge I'm going to stray back and forth off of that topic and various branching topics off of this, but I kind of wanted to get a little bit of time to think about it and kind of get I actually have notes. I've never written notes for a VC video before, but I've got notes prepared. Yeah, so I guess I'll start off by saying the idea of being offended that someone doesn't like something that you really enjoy is a little silly. But I can understand it at the same time. You know, it's very easy to get wrapped up in things that you really enjoy. I don't want to say build your entire personality or being as a human around the kind of media that you consume, but it is kind of true to an extent. You know, movies and TV and music and books and what kind of podcasts you listen to, if any, radio, even down to like how you consume those things, like through records, digitally, on the internet, that all kind of matters. Again, to an extent, it shouldn't be the entire foundation of your of yourself as your identity as a person. But it does matter to an extent. I'll keep saying that over and over again. You know, as you discover things, as again, using music as a perfect example, as you discover new music for the first time, like as you're a young person and you're learning about music and kind of what music can be and what music means to so many people around the entire world, it's very easy to get wrapped up in all that. And so that kind of, brings me to the topic of like the Rolling Stones 500 greatest records of all time, which I know is considered a cornerstone of music journalism, Rolling Stone magazine in general. But I have a couple issues with their list. Again, this is one of the topics I'm going to stray down into. I have a couple issues with the way they organize their list. They have greatest hits compilations on there, I don't really agree with that. I do not think that. Okay, I love the Beatles. I would say more than the next guy, on average. But I do not think that the Beatles have 4 out of the 10 greatest albums of all time, or however many they have in the top 10. They definitely don't have 2 in the top 3. Because I think, they have number 1 rated as Sgt. Pepper, obviously, which I'll get back to this. And number 2 they have as Pet Sounds by the Beach Boys. I love both of these records so much. And I would not call them my favorites, definitely. Those of you that have seen my top 100 countdown, you already know that, but they're still amazing. I still consider them definitely Pet Sounds more than Sgt. Pepper. They're both at least, probably like a 9 out of 10 if I had to rate it. I would probably rate Pet Sounds like a 10. But then I think number 3, I believe, is Revolver by the Beatles. And neither one of those Beatles records are, my favorite. My favorite Beatles record is the White Album, which again was kind of touched on by Matt Hayes, of how the pendulum of people hating the White Album has kind of swung back to people praising it and finding, like Sgt. Pepper a little overrated. So in my notes here, I have a couple other examples of stuff that the pendulum has swung either unfavorably or favorably towards. First example, I think one of the best examples of this is U2. U2's output in the 80s and even through the 90s is stellar, and I don't think they've necessarily released a bad record. They're consummate professionals, and they tour, and they I don't know if they're soul is still in it or whatever. That's beyond the point. The point is that they're not making like bad music, but just like the public reception to them has swung so far in the other direction, partially due to weird PR stuff. Like there was that whole thing with iTunes where everyone got the copy of I forget the name of that record. It was like downloaded onto everyone's iTunes automatically. People were very upset about that, which I guess it bothered me a little bit. But I'm not gonna, go and like yell at Bono or anything. There's other things to criticize Bono for. Giving out music for free, I don't think is one of them. Anyway, Red Hot Chili Peppers, same kind of thing. Great back catalog. The backlash against them starting, I guess, in like the 2000s has been kind of extreme. They're kind of a bit of a joke band now. Even though I don't think anyone would argue that like they're bad musicians. I think people mostly have an issue with the vocalist, Anthony Clytus, I want to say his name is. I'm sorry if I don't know. That shows my ignorance towards the Chili Peppers. Here's one that's a little sad. I don't think we're there yet, but Bob Dylan, who I consider, if not the best songwriter, easily top 10 for sure. I don't think anyone would argue that top 10 living songwriters. But Bob Dylan, as important as he is to older generations and me personally and several other people my age and younger, he'll always be important to a lot of people. But I think his relevance over time will only get lower and lower as he decides to only do like Frank Sinatra covers and stuff like that. He'll always be kind of a legacy act at this point, and eventually he'll have to stop touring, and it's sad to say it, eventually he'll die. And I think artists dying also kind of gives a boost to their public favor or whatever, for sure. I mean, look what happened with Prince. Nobody was really talking about Prince aside from like Purple Rain and 1999 and stuff, and then at least as far as I noticed in kind of the larger communities of music, not that he didn't have tons of fans, but the praise has gotten very extreme now. Same with Bowie, same with like Lemmy from Motorhead. I mean, you get my point. But with Dylan, I've noticed that he seems to be less and less important as the generations move on, and that'll be another thing I get onto in a little bit here, like generation gaps with music. But Andrew, you had a great point about, at the beginning of recorded music, I'll say like the early 20s, as it becomes more and more common to record music onto phonographs or whatever. The back catalog was very small. It was like basically classical music, small jazz groups like Dixieland, and basically blues musicians, and then gospel. That was it. And you only had a couple years worth of recordings to listen to. And now as we get further and further into, and we're getting up to about 100 years of recorded music at this point, there's so much music out there that people are able to, branch out, dive as deep as they want, stay at the surface level as they want. Some people are perfectly happy staying at the surface level of enjoying music, top 40 radio hits and things like that. Spotify curated playlists with full of Drake and stuff like that, which is a whole other thing that happened. Similar to the U2 incident with Drake. I'll move on though. The pendulum has swung against Green Day for sure. That's partially their own fault for not being as consistent as they really used to be. Gorillaz, I don't know how many of you are Gorillaz fans, especially you older guys, and I'll get to this again later with the generation gap topic. But Gorillaz was pretty much untouchable for the first like 3 records, and now they've released 2 kind of average or mediocre records in the past 2 years, and the backlash has swung against them really hard. People have, they start going as far as saying like Demon Days isn't really that great of a record. They're kind of a gimmick with the whole cartoon band thing, and I can see kind of where they're coming from with that. But I think it's pretty transparent that like, the backlash is only starting to get so strong because of the mediocre records they just put out. Taylor Swift, the pendulum has swung back and forth with Taylor Swift multiple times at this point. I think she's on kind of the unfavorable end of it at the moment because, she was kind of like a country star. Everyone knows her story. Kind of like a country music darling. Moved into pop and moved heavily into pop with her last record in 1989, which I'll say isn't bad. There's lots of really good songs on there, catchy songs. But now she's gone from over here to being kind of favored by the public and the radio and record sales in general. She's gone over here where her sales are down with her new record. Her tour is not selling as well, and she's kind of, a little bit of a laughingstock at the moment. She'll swing back though. She'll be fine. She really will. Carly Rae Jepsen. If you don't know that name, you know the song "Call Me Maybe," that really annoying song that was a thing a couple years ago. Her latest record is called Emotion. It's really good. She's like a better version of Taylor Swift at this point. And so I'll say the pendulum has swung favorably in her direction. Lady Gaga, again, someone that's gone back and forth. You can tell I'm going down the pop rabbit hole here. I think I've come to respect Lady Gaga. I had a weird thing against her as I was a little bit younger. But now, I'll move on. You all know that Lady Gaga is a good singer and a pretty decent songwriter. Adele, I feel like the backlash against Adele is starting to come into full swing. I really do. I mean, she sells really well. She's on the radio constantly, but I think that's kind of the problem is people get really tired of hearing Adele constantly. She has that one sound. My girlfriend disagrees with me. Okay, so that's it for that topic of like the pendulum swinging back and forth. But you guys kind of see what I mean with calling stuff, like nowadays you could very easily call like Taylor Swift overrated. But if she stays down this path of like being kind of like an underdog all of a sudden, which I know is weird to say because she's like a millionaire, and she'll always be okay. But in terms of her music being considered good, it might not ever swing back, and it might. And she might be considered overrated forever, or at some point in the future, who knows, she might even be considered underrated. The thing is, you can't really tell, and sometimes it's really hard for artists to even control what the public thinks of them. Kind of related to that, and on the topic of bands that a lot of people would consider overrated, is this kind of zeitgeist, or zeitgeist is a nice $10 word, isn't it? That it's this whole atmosphere that's built up around certain bands, specifically ones where like it's a little weird to say, but like a lead member of the band commits suicide or something like that. Perfect examples are Nirvana, The Doors, even though he died accidentally of like an overdose, Jim Morrison did, and Ian Curtis of this little band right here, Joy Division. I'm sure you all know this artwork here, and I would consider, many people would consider this album overrated, and people are tired of seeing that on t-shirts all the time. It's like a meme now to like make fun of people that wear Joy Division shirts, because it's always that one shirt. But Joy Division is one of my favorite bands. Their album Closer, I think it was number 2 on my top, no, it was like number 3 on my top 100. I really love both of their full-length albums, most of their singles. Great band, but they're kind of boiled down at this point to a t-shirt, which is really weird. And same kind of thing with Nirvana. I don't know, people know Smells Like Teen Spirit, and maybe a bunch of songs off of Nevermind, and maybe a couple off of like In Utero. But other than that, it's, the MTV Unplugged session, and that's about it, that people really know and love. And same kind of thing with The Doors. People, they know like Break On Through and LA Woman and things like that. But they'll always be kind of a t-shirt band, which is kind of a weird concept. So I can understand why people would call them overrated, but I feel like, they really are calling the fact that they're a t-shirt band kind of silly and overrated, if that makes any sense. Um, and the last kind of topic I have here is the concept of like generation gaps that I was talking about a minute ago. Um, I'm sure, okay, it typically falls with generation gaps, but like you have the older guys, you know, the jazz enthusiasts, the classic rock diehards, the hair metal guys, you know, even the VC is kind of divided into cliques a little bit along these lines. But like generation gaps, I don't think anyone really about my age, maybe a little bit older than me and younger, would really say that Kiss was like an amazing band. And yet, if you get into, you know, the guys that were about my age or younger when Kiss was a thing, they all probably love Kiss because, you know, that was just kind of the thing back then. So on the opposite side of that, you have artists or even albums like Damn by Kendrick Lamar. You know, this was, did this win a Grammy for Best Record last year? I think it did, right?
Well, he won the Pulitzer.
He won a Pulitzer Prize.
He's the first ever.
For this record, which is kind of a big thing. I'm pretty sure he won a Grammy, was like Best Record or Best Artist or something. And I wouldn't say that this is as good as his last record or the one before that.
He won Best Rap Album.
Best Rap Album, okay. Which I would agree with probably. I think it was probably my favorite rap album of 2017. But the backlash is starting to come against him because, you know, it's popular. People love to hate on things that are popular. I won't even say hate on, just kind of call things overrated. Which, again, is kind of a strange concept of why that happens. It's hard to tell a lot of times. But it just does. It just happens. So Kendrick Lamar and kind of hip hop in general, I feel like a lot of older guys call overrated. Which, if it's not your thing, I don't blame you. You know, everyone's entitled to taste and their own opinions, and no one should be forced to listen to music. You know, you're supposed to listen to what you like, and I would say that if I never listened to anything new, I would go crazy, but I can totally understand why people stick with like the same 40 or 50 albums and never listen to anything else. It makes sense. I have a great example here. There's a little song that I'm sure most people know. It's by a little songwriter named Paul Simon. It's a little song called The Sounds of Silence, and at this point, you know, it's a classic song, but at this point it's a meme. It's, you know, it's like something that is played as a joke when someone's being like melodramatic, or it's used in Arrested Development as a joke, which is hilarious, by the way. I laugh every single time that song is played on that show. But, you know, that song means a lot to Paul Simon, or at least it did when he wrote it, and it has this kind of deep, you know, political or social message behind it. And now Disturbed covers it with those weird ass vocals from that dude in Disturbed, and it's like a really dramatic cover of the song. And yeah, it's like a joke now, which is really funny to me because I think that's one of the, you know, defining songs of the 60s, which is one of the most, in my opinion, one of the most important times for pop music in the US or in the English-speaking world in general. And it's a joke now, which is really funny. And that has to do a lot with generation gaps, because, you know, people heard it back then on the context of the album or the single or on the radio or whatever, and now where people hear it is on in the context of comedy, which is a funny thing to think about. And what other records do I have right here? Oh, I kind of skipped over this one. Another kind of t-shirt thing is Dark Side of the Moon, you know, which I love this album too. I think it might be slightly overrated. And then something I think that people are so torn about, they can't decide whether or not it's underrated or overrated, is Neutral Milk Hotel's in the airplane over the sea. People are so tired of seeing this artwork. People are so tired of hearing about this record. But I think it's amazing. And it's not for everybody. It's a little different. It's a little strange. It's a little dissonant at times. My point is, I like it. This should be if you take away one thing from this video, you should just know that I don't think it's rude to call an album overrated, and at the same time, everyone is entitled to their own musical opinion, obviously, and obviously everyone should listen to what they enjoy. People can choose whether or not to explore new grounds with music, or people can stay in their comfort zone. It doesn't matter. Everyone can do what they want. Don't get angry at each other, please. Just everyone enjoy music. Listen to what I say. Enjoy music. Everyone follow my instructions, and you'll be happy. It's really that simple. I feel like I had more to talk about with this, but it's already like a 21-minute video. So I'll wrap it up here. Again, I really enjoyed everyone else's videos on this topic. I just wanted to kind of get a rant / rambly kind of video out there today. And this was a lot of fun to kind of talk about and think about all week, because this topic is like 2 weeks old now. So yeah, it was kind of a good time. I'm interested to see what you guys think about some of my examples here. Anyway, take care. Hope to see you in the comments, and have a good weekend, you guys.